Welcome to episode 7 of the Into the Indies podcast. Today's guest is the developer of one of the most weird, in all the correct ways, games I've tried out. He is known online as BossyPino. Welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here. Nice to meet you as well.
So, you are one of the most recently started indie devs I've interviewed in this podcast. I would like to know, first of all, when you look back, what was the first game you played that you thought, oh, this is an art form I would like to be a part of?
Definitely growing up playing Majora's Mask was probably my it really opened my eyes as a small child, just thinking about all the possibilities that media could take us through. It was a game that both terrified me and really inspired me. Being able to change your form, explore these environments, the story, the mechanics. Majora's Mask definitely stands out as one of those early games for me that was really, really impactful. It wouldn't be till later that I decided I could try making my own games, but definitely looking back, that was a time where I learned about what games would be capable of.
Taking a look through your website and the blog posts, we see Cryohazard as your first foray into commercial, let's say, video game development. Before we touch on Cryohazard and your journey there, did you have any previous attempts from that project that you worked on?
Yes.
Or was Cryohazard your first?
So I had a long history of attempts, many years of, on my kind of professional life, you could say. Spent a lot of time in school, not doing game dev stuff. I'm a pharmacist as well, or at least used to be. And throughout my time, I've always been trying to make stuff. I've always been inspired to make stuff. And some was collaborative, some solo in terms of projects, but Cryohazard was the first time I was really able to break out of a bunch of failed projects and actually release something. So Cryohazard is the first kind of release that actually was able to be a game, you could say.
Based on that first blog post mentioning your initial entry, I assume, on the game deving when you stopped being a pharmacist. When I read it, this was a post, if I remember correctly, from around 2024. And when I read it, I thought that it might have been recently written to the date that it was actually posted. A couple years after that fact, can you walk us through what was on your mind when you thought, okay, let's leave a conventional workplace, a conventional job to chase indie game deving?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's very complicated, my feelings about it. I think that I've always been incredibly inspired, and I've always had a lot of belief in myself. I was lucky enough to have a pretty good childhood, and I think I have a lot of, people have told me, oh, you can go and do what you want to do in life. You can succeed if you put your mind to it, if you spend many years developing the skills. And it still feels very selfish, risky, dangerous to pursue, like you said, a less conventional job. I am just so inspired by games and media, and I really feel like I have stories that I can tell, and that they're going to be weird and maybe niche, but being able to express that voice over the years has been incredibly impactful for me, and I've seen myself go through so much growth. It still feels selfish. There's a lot of problems and sacrifices I've made in order to continue making games, and it doesn't get easier. It gets harder as time goes on, as you continue making that choice. I think around that time when I wrote that original post, there was a lot of excitement, this big bright future. And now that I'm actually releasing some stuff, the feedback is amazing, and being able to like connect with people is great, but it still remains to be just as hard to continue to choose it.
Yeah, it seems that this era in general is not built for creatives, unfortunately. Even myself with the blog that I'm running and my creative avenues, it's always like I have a main job and I work on the projects afterwards because of my choice that I cannot make do with all the creative projects. Especially in Greece, it's not feasible to even
Right.
think about it. So yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. A question I have for that, perhaps we might get a bit into cryohazard by now, but why video games in particular? If you are a creative person, there are a lot of different creative outlets that perhaps you could argue might be a bit easier to tackle than video gaming. Why did you choose that video games specifically?
Sure. Well, I'm inspired by, and I engage with a lot of different types of media, movies, TV shows, music. I write and try to listen to a lot of music. I think if I wasn't working on video games, I would just be working on music. For me, I tend to be the kind of person that I really like the challenge, and I like finding where my limits are and pushing them. And I think it's incredible that so many games get released, considering like making video games is like, God, it's hard. It's so hard. And when it pays off, it's great. And it usually does not pay off. It's so many things can go wrong. You have to be a software engineer, you have to be a tester, you have to be a musician or at least have a musical ear. You have to, I mean, I could just rattle on the list of like things you need to like be competent at. It takes years and years to think that, I was so ambitious early on starting to make stuff, and you just learn over time, you have to rely on other people to get things done. One person can't do it all. And at the same time, you still have to be the person who makes all the decisions, and at the end of the day is responsible for what you're making. I think for me, the challenge of that is part of the appeal. And I always thought to myself, it's an area I love. I love video games. I really see it as like the business of like building experiences for people. I think that playing Wind Waker growing up was so different from watching pirate movies, and they sit in such different places in my mind. Partially because, I mean, you could argue Wind Waker's not like fundamentally a pirate game, but like still, like it's so inspiring to think that you can bring experiences like that to people, and it is so hard. But there's also a bunch of great people in this space. I have a lot of people that inspire me. I was just listening to a podcast with David Szymanski, the creator of like Dusk and Iron Lung, and there are people like that who convince me that it's possible. So I would say a mix of just the really loving the space, uh, being very inspired by some of the people in it, and then my kind of skill sets and interests tend to align with game development as well. Me enjoying like programming and recently learning how to make some art, and then music and sound effects. Uh, yeah, I think it's a confluence of a few different things.
So I understand that you are one of those indie devs that actually enjoy having multiple hats in a project rather than see it as a inconvenience.
Yeah, I just wish I could like clone myself so I could get more done, because it takes one of the main reasons that Muffles Life Sentence is an RPG maker, which some people don't even realize, which is a huge compliment. I
I
love.
didn't, to be honest, until you now brought it up.
I appreciate that. I work very hard to because there's some bias against RPG Maker, which is there's some foundation for that, I suppose. But one of the reasons it's in RPG Maker is because using a more traditional engine like Unity, it would just take, it wouldn't be a full project by now. I would be just starting, perhaps, in a more traditional engine. So I have to choose my battles very wisely. I have to choose my projects very wisely, considering I'm a kind of a one-man band with people helping me and a publisher and things like that. But yeah, I do have to be very particular. I do really enjoy it though. I enjoy the multiple hats. I like working on different things on different days. Yeah.
Fun fact, I have a haphazard, I don't dare even call it demo on RPG Maker XP way back when. It was a really fun time to spend a couple of weekends just diddling around with some stuff and then go on a Monday on my school and just give a random CD to a friend. Oh, I made this. Please try it out. It was really funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So let's jump into Cryohazard then. Mike, this came out on 2024. Can you walk us through a bit when you first decided, okay, that will be my first official project that I will release?
This was around the time where I had just gotten out of a long-term project that ended up not coming to pass with a dear friend of mine. And kind of in the ashes of that failure, I use the word failure a lot. I don't always mean it in the most negative context. I think failures are very important, but it was a thorough failure. We didn't have much to share with the world. It didn't pan out. Me deciding that I had to start releasing games. The best ideas in the world, the best games are the ones that come out, I suppose is a way to put it. The best games are ones that actually get released. And I really wanted to center in on a project that I know that I could build and learn so much from the experience. And then it would act as this momentum moving forward to working on bigger and better projects. And it still took many iterations and attempts to figure out the formula that I wanted. But Cryohazard was definitely a game where I wanted to push my limits, learn about my inclinations when it came to making a game, and at the same time, always have a deadline. Always know that this game has to come out in 4 months, 6 months, however long it took me. And along the way, learning a lot about things like how to interact with the Steam API and posting a Steam page and setting up a business. And the game was made in Game Maker, so learning a lot about Game Maker. Yeah, those are sort of the things going on around that time that pushed me towards making the game that Cryohazard ended up being.
Can you walk us through a bit the design of Cryohazard? It appears to me to be a bit of a unconventional game design. Not some. It combines a bit of the roguelike pathing of sorts, starting from a goal one, reaching a goal two, but you have the mechanic of for lack of a better word, train with multiple wagons, and then you have the mobility inside it. So each wagon has its own skill, and enemies are in specific places. So placement is really important. What intrigued you about this design?
I think that's a great description you gave. I really like that. I've always loved roguelites and roguelikes. One of the ways I was able to actually make Cryohazard a game was doing a lot of the prototyping and mechanical elements on pen and paper. So like creating all the different, like kind of out a bunch of little hexes and then like writing descriptions on them to like model the the traversal elements. I was very inspired by a game with some great strategic elements called Monster Train, and I kind of took some of those elements and reworked them. But I really liked the verticality when it came to where abilities were being triggered, or where they were like mechanics having like a place in space. I was really intrigued by, so I did that in more of a horizontal way as opposed to Monster Train's verticality, and I simplified a lot, and really inspired by games like Slay the Spire or Darkest Dungeon that have map elements and traversal elements with their combat systems, and used a hex grid. Also being very inspired by like Into the Breach, which to say Cryohazard's name next to these games, like these games are incredible games. I think Cryohazard did a few cool things. I think it has a really special place in my heart. But yeah, very inspired by roguelike games, particularly those ones I mentioned.
After it being your first project, what would you say were some of the major lessons you learned from it? You teased already, like checking out the Steam API and stuff like that, but if you think about it right now, a couple years have passed. What is your takeaway of Cryohazard as a project for you?
I think the biggest thing was it taught myself that I could make a game and release it. And I think that's not something to be understated. Just giving myself the confidence to say, yeah, it was hard. There were a lot of pitfalls, a lot of bugs, a lot of design decisions and constraints and things to sacrifice to get out the door. But I could release a game. I could make a product, put out there, and that means I could do it again. I think that was a really big deal for me, and it wasn't some like tiny little, something that Cryohazard was something I could be proud of, and something where I could learn a lot from. I tried to simplify. The game is still a bit needlessly complicated mechanically. I could learn a lot from the art elements, so it was a great stepping stone and great moving forward. I realized that I was mostly interested in the story components when it came to Cryohazard. I wanted to pair like strategy and these more textured mechanical elements, and then thread story through with it, which is less common in a lot of roguelites. And I realized that they didn't always pair well together, right? I was either choosing to like do story stuff or do strategic stuff, and I wanted my next project to be much more kind of narrative focused. I realized the importance of narrative in the things that I work on, be wanting to kind of push that to the forefront. Yeah.
Mhm. Before we move on, a final question on Cryohazard. Did you work again on this project 100% on your own, like graphics, sounds, everything you did yourself, or was there some support?
So I did uh, bring on. I hired a very nice man. I believe his name is Sultan Pixel, who did the artwork for mostly the cars, the wagon, the cars, as well as a few of the other components. I'm not remembering the name of the individual that did the Steam uh, capsule art, but they did an amazing job as well. Everything else was done by me, the programming, the sound. But yeah, I did bring on a few people to help out with the art. At that point, I wasn't making art pretty much at all. Some of the UI, but that's about it.
So Muffles was essentially your first foray into art as well.
Correct. I had never really made anything that I liked art wise before Muffles.
Mm-hmm. So that brings me to the big question to transition to Muffles. You are sitting around, I assume, after the release of Cryohazard in 2024, and you decide to change genres, change engine, and and decide to actually do the art of the next project yourself, with a bigger focus on narrative and a deck mechanic as well. How did this soul transition came?
Yeah, it was a lot of changes. I made a lot of changes between Cryohazard and Muffles. I think it's something that to give some just very slight to kind of tee myself off a little bit here. You always hear in the indie game space, like, make a lot of games, make small games. And you don't realize how important that is until you start making games and releasing them. You just really learn about, I love roguelites. I love roguelites. In making a roguelite, I realized that I liked playing them more than I liked making them, which is, I might make another roguelite at some point, but you don't learn these things until you go through the 6 months of doing it. And then you are say, oh, I've learned some things about myself. I could daydream and write down ideas for games all day and continue to be inspired by them, but that's so different than actually making them. So I guess coming out of Cryohazard, I learned a lot of fundamental things. I learned some of the limitations of Game Maker. I learned about, wanting to have more of a focus on narrative, pushing it to the forefront. I learned a lot of things about my own internal workflow and things I wanted to focus on moving forward. And so I basically I also have many hours in RPG Maker. I think around like almost 4,000 at this point. Of course, after Muffles, that that ballooned a good bit, but it was an engine I knew really well. And I started asking myself, okay, what are the games that have inspired me so much? Games like Paper Mario, games like Off, Lisa, some of the breakout RPG Maker hits. And could I make a game that made me feel the same way as those games make me feel? And if I could, how would I do it? And that kind of philosophical shift also brought along with it me needing to change a lot of those things. So I think it was a mixture of I think me wanting to do things different after Cryohazard was a mix of learning lessons from Cryohazard about what worked for me and what didn't work for me, as well as being inspired and being driven to look in this new direction of different kind of base of games that inspired me, namely Paper Mario and Off and games like that.
From a date perspective, when would you say you started tinkering with the idea of what became Muffles?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'd have to look. I got my website pulled up. Maybe I can see when I made a post. It wasn't too. It was pretty soon after putting out Cryohazard that some of the.
So you weren't like the classic developer, creative who was like co-working with multiple ideas at the same time, and Cryohazard happened to be the first project, but Muffles, for example, was always in the back burner to be worked on.
Oh, I'm much worse about that now. Nowadays, I'm like, I got 3 different parallel things going on.
As you should, somebody would say.
Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I got arguments both ways. It's good to like keep your sights on one main thing, but yeah, having not all your eggs in one basket, always good.
And you need some palate cleansers, I would say.
Oh yeah, especially when it's not a hobby, when it's like what you do for 10 hours a day. Like you gotta change it up. That's part of the reason why I like wearing the different hats, because I'm if I'm always working on Muffles, but today I'm writing music and tomorrow I'm making art, that it takes longer to go insane working on the same thing.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, no, there was a clean break between Cryohazard and Muffles for sure.
Did you take any time off, let's say, between the two projects, or was it right away? Because taking into consideration that Cryohazard was released according to Steam around June 2024, and I remember playing the demo of Muffles in January 2025, That's it. And as far as I see on Steam, it came out on March 2025. Was that an easier, in air quotes, quick project to do, or did you start working almost immediately after the release?
Oh, I started working as soon as I'd land on a concept, which was probably a few months after Cryohazard came out. I work on Muffles very quickly. The episodes all came out within a few months of each other. So I think a mixture of both. Very soon after Cryohazard, and I also work on it quickly.
Mhm. I will ask you several questions about Muffles because I have several topics that seem interesting to me. Let's start with the most straightforward one that we kind of already discussed. Why RPG Maker in particular, despite of you using as game maker you said before?
Yeah, I part of my wanting to focus on narrative meant that I really like programming. I'm not the strongest programmer, but I do enjoy building things from like a systems perspective. I've learned a lot over the years, and I honestly really like the idea of building something like Muffles from scratch or from near scratch. But if I wanted my next project to come out in less than 2 years, because I knew I wanted to be a multi-episode story based thing. That's how I kind of saw it in my mind. The sort of like chapters of Paper Mario, like getting to see a story through to the end was something that really kind of gripped me. And this idea of putting it out in these episodes and like maybe it starts off small, but over time, as more and more information gets released, maybe it could gain some appeal. I didn't want to be this story thing that I locked myself away for years and years and then put it out. And then, there wasn't, people didn't have context and I hadn't tried to like grow it organically over time. So RPG Maker, it's got really good things about it, has really awful things about it too. Over the years, it's really become a patchwork in terms of like all the additional plugins and code. Like I'm working with some other devs right now, just trying to like patch some issues with some of the combat system stuff, for instance. But it lets me work quick. It lets me work really quick. I can have an idea and get it in the game, in the same day. And with all the testing that an RPG needs, and it just so much time and work on a game of the scale I ended up making, that the only feasible way for me to do it as one person was going to be in an engine that I knew really well and an engine that really kind of like just kept it simple. So, and I knew from games like Amori or Lisa that kind of bigger scale games in RPG Maker were possible. It was kind of built for that. So I went for it. Yeah.
You already talked a bit right now about my second question, which was the episodic nature of this. Um, was I understand it was always the plan from a storytelling perspective, but right now, if you check on Steam, you see that the first episode is essentially free, and then you periodically released the next episodes as they were developed, I assume. Um,
Yep.
was that always part of the plan from the start, or did it just happen?
That was not always the plan from the start. Well, it was the plan to, as episodes were being created, to like release them. But the decision to go with episodic DLC versus like an early access model was very up in the air. That was not decided on right away. And in retrospect, it actually, there's a lot of headaches with doing the episodic DLC from the game dev side and from the kind of release and marketability side as well. And it ended up being mostly a pretty big headache. If we could go back and do it again, I think we would do just, traditional early access. And uh, there's downsides with that too. Like early access is a bit more of a contentious thing nowadays. Like early access games don't always get finished. Sometimes they're very buggy. I want to make sure every episode I was putting out was like a solid, like tested game. Like you could buy it and know that it was going to work. but ended up being a headache. So I knew we wanted to release them in episodes, but didn't always know exactly the right model for us until we a bit further along and we decided to release it as DLCs in line with like I think Telltale Games and like Life is Strange did it like that as well on Steam.
So, if you recreate, let's say, today the same project, would you opt, for example, to have it as a singular project with inbuilt episodes, like only inside the game itself? Or would you think about it, different Steam pages again, different chapters?
I think I would keep it as one Steam game that got many additions over time, and then there could still be room for DLC for like additional systems or like a boss rush mode, things like that. But I would keep it as one game. It's just really hard to do episodes on Steam that way. At least it was for us.
Mm. My third question is, why deck builder in particular?
Yeah, so I was just talking about how much I like roguelites, and certainly there's no shortage of amazing deck builder roguelites. I like quite a few of them. For me, I think they're just super cool. And once I got my mind around this idea of like, because Muffles is a lot about identity and this kind of weird cast of characters that live in your head, like, oh, drafting your own identity, this idea that these different characters are tied to these cards. These cards are, uh, there's kind of like a narrative element to like the combat in that way. I got really hooked on that idea. And so this game being very inspired by other RPGs, RPGs have a lot in common amongst each other, but like one thing isn't really like a certain particular combat system. Aside it being turn-based, most RPG combat systems are turn-based, but like between Earthbound and Paper Mario and you could get away with a lot of different types of combat. So I felt confident like deck builder could work as long as I kept it pretty simple and kind of like to the point and try to make it interesting with some of the mechanics. But the real answer is just I just really like deck builders, and I thought I could work with the kind of visual style I was going for, like kind of a pixel based deck builder, art style wise. Yeah, I think they're cool.
If somebody checks randomly, like I did, honestly, last year when I checked, I think I checked it as part of a Steam event, like Steam Next Fest or something like that, last year's February or something.
Mhm.
Right away, the first thing that I thought was, oh, this is in the general category that I like to put in this as Undertale-like. This is this type of weird experience, story-driven, um, has its a really unique art direction. Okay, you could say creepy pixel art. Undertale has that as well, and the other stuff that I personally put into that generic category have. But at the same time, they are visually distinct. That I can differentiate. Oh, this is Muffles. Oh, this is Undertale. But they fit a general feel. Um, have you shared from your fans in the Discord or anything these types of connections when they tried out Muffles?
Oh yes, definitely. I've heard about those kind of connections to Undertale and Deltarune, both games that are hugely inspirational for me. Like we were just talking about people in the space like David Szymanski that give me the sense of like, oh, this is possible. Definitely, like Toby Fox and Undertale is like, wow, if someone can do that, which I mean, obviously Undertale is incredible, but learning that you could do something of that magnitude, uh, really inspirational for me. Absolutely, I when I go to like events in person, like expos and stuff, I usually when I try to like coerce people over to like trying the game demo, like come over here, try this. I usually say like kind of spooky Undertale is like a really easy way to get people because everyone knows what Undertale is. But yeah, a lot of comparisons to RPGs, to games like that, Undertale, Lisa, Off, for sure. And the art style, I am very inspired by a game called World of Horror that does.
Ooh, I need. Yeah,
World of
for
Horror is
sure.
great. Obviously, very different kind of game, but the kind of like harsh, contrasted art style. Because I was just learning how to make art, I told myself like, okay, like 2 colors, like maybe 3, and like go from there. Don't get too ambitious. So that was part of the reason for the choice of that style.
World of Horror has been in my wish list for a while now. I need to buy it at some point. And since you mentioned the art style, so it was part of the plan to at some episodes adjust the 2 colors, let's say, you used.
Sorry, the question was. Can you repeat it?
Uh, when you check the next episodes, you see that at some episodes you have adjusted the 2 colors you've been using, like you said,
Oh
pick
yes,
one,
yes,
two or
yes.
three colors.
Well, when you stare at the same color palette for 1,000 hours, you're like, maybe. I always want to do the thing that World of Horror does, which is you can like unlock or like customize these color palettes. And I thought the idea of doing a different color palette each episode, because each episode takes place in very different kind of settings. So like the first episode is in this like craggy, rocky prison that's kind of like built out of this old castle called Drakencrag. Next episode is on Genghis, which is like this desert western island with some beaches. Third episode is on Tangletop, which is this like dense forest and these hills and this almost like Silent Hill esque component section to it. Very spooky. And so I wanted different color palettes for all these different settings, because it would really help the simple pixel art kind of have some lift behind it to kind of give you a sense of what these places felt like, perhaps, and how much light there was, and how bright it was, and give some tonal changes as well. So partially color swapping so I don't go insane, and partially because I think it helped with some of the settings.
Yeah. Uh, can you talk a bit about what inspired you for this particular story you're telling in Muffles Life Sentence? Because right now, up until right now, we've talked about like mechanics, genres, art style, but what about the narrative itself? What are some of your inspirations behind that?
Yeah, looking back on it, it's really weird. Like, I don't entirely know where all my inspirations came from. I was really driven, having played so many RPGs, I was really fascinated with the idea of like the silent protagonist and how that's typically not acknowledged. Like in Legend of Zelda, Link pretty much never talks, and we just, because it's a stand-in for the player character. So like, yeah, they shouldn't talk. Like, we get to experience it through them. It can be great when protagonists have a voice, but it can be a different kind of cool sort of thing when they don't. And I thought, what would that look like if it was explained? What sort of protagonist can't talk or wouldn't be allowed to? And I've always been driven by weird characters and like issues of identity for whatever reason. I don't know why. Prisons have also always fascinated me from like from a lot of different perspectives, from the ruthless kind of like way as a society we've turned capitalist uh, ventures wild on being able to like incarcerate people, and also just the contained space from like from I don't even know the right word for it, but like the kind of constraints in terms of narrative it provides, that all these people are stuck in these rooms together and they get along or they don't get along. It just very interesting of a place to explore narratively. So kind of a lot of these different ideas were in my head, along with thinking about I'll bring them up again, the inspirations of games like Off and Paper Mario, and thinking like, okay, if I wanted to, what if I explored these really dark, heavy-handed themes, and I did it in a way that was like pretty not serious. It's pretty lighthearted and comedic. Like feels kind of like Paper Mario, but we're dealing with like a main character that looks like a car crash victim, like in prison. What would that feel like? And then kind of unfolded from there, I suppose.
If you check both Cryohazard and Muffles Life Sentence side by side, it might not be immediately obvious from Cryohazard, but you can feel the underlying theme always being mystery, weirdness, weird scenarios. And I don't mean that in the bad way that we call somebody, oh, you're weird. Like, intriguing, not run of the mill, you could also say.
Sure.
What are your general inspirations you think behind that? Were you always like liking these types of more out of the norm media, or yeah, I think what I'm asking is what made you like this type of storytelling, even if it's not just environmental, visual, actual story. What makes you like it so much?
My tastes do tend to get a little bit on the weirder side for sure. I think you go down the rabbit hole of like weird RPG Maker games, you find a lot. Like it's incredible, like Fear and Hunger's success recently, because that's a weird game. That's a weird, dark game, and the fact that it's become so popular, I think, is incredible. There's a lot of things for people to connect to, good and bad, and I think all it took was people finding it. I think that's the
RPG Maker.
Yeah, Fear and Hunger's.
I didn't know that. Oh snap! No, I'm just I just don't know how to feel, because I know Fear and Hunger, but I never thought it was an RPG Maker game. Okay. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, you're good. It's a really good looking RPG Maker game. The dev who makes it is very, very talented. I think that, at least I like to hope that the internet allows really weird, particular niche stuff to find its audience, right? And with things like Fear and Hunger, it turns out there was a far bigger audience than one might think. Because fundamentally, even though some of the topics or the choices are really particular, like you see the person behind it, you see the vision, you see the creative elements there, and you can connect to it. There's a lot to connect to. It's so much just a force of interest and creativity. And I really wanted with Muffles, even though some of the subject matter was very particular and weird, I wanted to make sure like the story being told was really solid. Like I was, I have a plot arc, I have beats, I have characters you can connect to. Even though some of the particulars, you think of like Mad Libs, like some of the nouns people might not be familiar with, it still worked as a coherent story and still played pacing wise, content wise, like something you might expect for a weird RPG. So I always wanted it to like function well as a game, as a story, but filling in the details very much with the things that inspire me. And I happen to be perhaps a bit of a weird person, so those details were going to be maybe things people aren't used to seeing in games. I don't know.
As I said in the opening, weird, but in all the correct ways, in my opinion.
Thank you.
A couple days ago, if not a week, you released the final episode, the 5th episode of Muffles Life Sentence, and it just so happened that 2 days ago you released a lengthy blog post that acts as a proto post-mortem of sorts for Muffles Life Sentence. It's still too early to have a discussion. Like I had a couple other people here with recent games, but they so happen to have released them like a month ago, 2 months ago, if not a bit longer.
Mhm.
But if I put you on the spot right now, what would you say as of right now is your uh, opinion of Muffles Life Sentence as a whole, as a project?
Yeah, I overall, super proud of the project it ended up becoming. I think the fact that it clocks in around like 15 hours for most people, and the amount I was able to do in terms of learning art and creating like a compelling vision and experience for people to play through. I'm very proud of what I was able to accomplish, and the help from and support from my producer Nomad and my publisher, being able to work with them and create this really special thing. I feel really happy with where it stands as a project. There is also a lot of learning lessons and things that aren't perfect. I think that, to just bring up a few, I think the art style is a bit compromising for some of its success. I think it I want to work on projects in the future that are a little more less maybe jarring visually. Some people really like Muffles art style, but I don't know that it might not do it the most favors in terms of marketability compared to maybe some other styles.
I'm
It's
one
kind of
of
like,
the fans, by the way.
I appreciate that. I like it as well. You should check out World of Horror. It does similar things. I really like it. Yeah, so like lessons like that to like not fundamentally change how I make games, but like learn about how people look at things, and they say for like a person to pick up your game, they have to like hear about it 7 times, just like on the internet. It's like, oh, you see an ad here, and you hear someone talk about it, and eventually you're like, oh, I'm gonna go check out this thing. Uh, Most of the time, it takes multiple times about hearing about something before you decide you want to like check it out yourself. People don't always realize that, but it happens more often than you think. And I just want to give games I work on, especially like future ones, the best chance they have for people to like check it out and be like, oh, this is something that I really like. I'm taking a tangent a bit. When it comes to Muffles, I feel incredibly proud. Incredibly proud. There are a lot of things I want to change for the future, but those things don't include, like, I always want to make narrative games. I always want them to have a bunch of weird little freaky characters. I want to have very stylized visuals. And those things I really learned about making Muffles. I didn't know all those things making Cryohazard. These last few years have been very helpful for me to learning like what sort of games I want to make. And I got a bit lucky that Muffles ended up being so many of those things. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but overall very proud. And there's new people every day joining the Discord and telling me about things they like and don't like, and yeah, it's very inspiring. I really the all the fan art and the people that have told me about their experiences with the game and how much they like it means so much to me. It's really incredible.
I think when you start seeing fan art, that's when you say, okay, I found somebody. I have something here.
We got a bunch of really good fan art really early. That's how I felt. Like, honestly, it's stuff like that that really pushed me through making the full game. So much weird fan art, sometimes problematic weird, but like a lot of really good fan art. Um, it's so inspirational to me, especially fan art that's like way better than I can do art wise. It's like, wow, you should be making the game, not me. I'm just doing this pixel art.
But you could
Anyway,
argue that if you had that better fan art right away, perhaps that person wouldn't be as interested in checking it out. It's
yeah,
always that
maybe.
weird thing.
I also think something that's really cool about pixel art is that it can leave kind of like ambiguities. It can like leave a bit of a question mark so people can interpret it different ways. And I've always really like seen like for instance with the capsule art that we have for Muffles, like people are really split on how Constant looks, the robot security guard character, because he looks uh kind of freaky. I think he looks really cool. It's not exactly how Constant looks in my mind, but because he's a little pixel dude. There's a lot of different ways that people can look at that and be like, "This is what it looks like in my head." And I think that's cool. I think that's something that simple visuals can really lend themselves to. I like it.
Yeah, and also I would add from my experience reviewing indie games in particular for 8 years, close to 9 years now. A good pixel art, which would be what Muffles, I would file Muffles under, which is good pixel art, is timeless. A bad or medium 3D art can be dated really quickly. And it's a really weird, it's a different ball game altogether, 3D art. But pixel art, there's some way, in some weird way, it has this. I will think about it the same if it came out in the 90s, in 2020s, or perhaps in 2040s.
Yeah, I totally agree. Good pixel art stands the test of time. I totally agree.
You teased a bit, but I'll put you on the spot yet again to slowly close this really interesting discussion. What's next? Do you have any plans already? Any ideas that you would like to share?
That's a
Or are you
great
just
question. Yeah, I kind of talked before about early on having a clean break between Cryohazard and Muffles, and now I got kind of parallel tracks to some extent. I'm always going to want to have a main project, but so lots of things in the works behind the scenes, different kind of avenues being followed. In terms of what's next, I don't have nothing to announce in terms of particulars, but something soon. I don't want to. I think Muffles is going to stand out a bit by being such a large project, such a long form project. I want to put out things with a bit more of a regular cadence, and if for bigger projects, continuous updates and letting people know what I'm working on. I don't like the idea of disappearing in the shadows completely, but like I said before, sticking with compelling story, sticking with weird little characters, really learning about what my strengths were with Muffles and delivering them in new ways that are a bit more like fun and engaging and and suit the current people who have found Muffles and bringing more people into the fold who might like the kind of games I make. So yeah, looking more into working in 3D, working outside of RPG Maker. I'm currently working in Unity. I think it's going to be a good transition for the kinds of games I want to make. But I might go back to RPG Maker at some point because it's a great engine for working on quick stuff. So nothing official to promote or anything, but working very hard.
So okay, writing down Muffles 3D in a year.
I so I thought about that for a little while. Hey, like what if Muffles was an ED? And no, I need to work on new things. I can't.
You could argue that Muffles world and characters are a hit. Okay, it's not like a major hit, like viral. We will see you in every single Nintendo Direct there is, but it has that type of feel that they could work in as their own universe, as their own characters, mascots, what have you. But yeah, I'm merely jesting that since you mentioned all these other inspirations like Zelda, etc. So okay, the next logical step is this franchise on 3D.
Right.
But yeah,
I would love to work on more projects in this universe. Maybe not even games, but I do really like the world that kind of got fleshed out through making Muffles. One of our Discord users, Lame or Lame, I believe is how it's pronounced, likes to joke that it's the Maddox cinematic universe, the MCU, Maddox being the name of the prison system. So who knows? Maybe some more stuff in that universe. And I believe we have a few people that write fanfic for that universe sometimes. So that's always fun too. I don't know much about that though. Don't ask me about that.
I won't. After you mentioned the fan art and some of them being questionable, I don't want to delve into that territory.
That's smart. Good idea.
For the listeners, this interview is being recorded a while before it's actually getting released, so there might be some news in the meantime about new projects or something new. Where should people follow you to keep in touch with any news you might have?
Yeah, so BossyPino, spelled BossyPino, pretty much anywhere I'm going to have some sort of presence. The best way to get a hold of me or hear about news is definitely the Discord that we run, which you can also search BossyPino for. Got a website as well. Yeah, those are all good places. And if you got feedback about Muffles or anything, come and bug me about it. Tell me all your thoughts. Listen.
Thank you very much for this really interesting interview. And we'll be back with another episode of Into the Indies podcast. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.